So permissions, it's being recorded. Welcome everybody. We were going to have a live stream for this Thursday, but unfortunately load shedding does not always work in our favor. And a lot of you are trying to get kids to bed in the dark and also sort a couple of other things out in the dark. So from a connection point of view, we thought it would be best to pre-record this Thursday's live stream and upload it. But in future, we might do pre-recorded video podcasts. So look forward to that. So we're transitioning into more reliable content for everybody. But I'm very excited. We have JP Malava in the tiny room, and I'm going to introduce him in a sec. But please, by all means, we might not have a live chat, but we've got the comments below. So we would love to have any questions, any comments. We do monitor those comments so that we can reply to each one of them. But at the same time, in the description underneath this video, we've got JP's details, so you can always just direct message him and get in contact with him and just ask whatever you have on your heart. But yeah, the Tiny Room, as you know, is a counseling and therapy private practice. We are based in Stellenberg in Bellville, but at the same time, we provide virtual sessions, counseling or therapy to our clients nationally and internationally. But what's exciting is JP's sitting in Pretoria, so we can have people from national and international possibly being on our video podcast. And we've got some great, amazing golden nuggets, diamonds, I'm sure, that gems that we are going to get into today. So yeah, JP, welcome. Thank you so much for your time. And I know that we're going to just be vibing and talking about amazing things and speaking into people's lives. So today, I know you had it on your heart to speak about resilience and personal mastery and emotional agility. And when I invite guests to come and speak on our live streams or on our video podcasts, there's always room for you to dictate, or our guests to dictate, what's on their heart. And this is what you came up with. So when you got the invite, what did you think? Like, why these 3 points?
Well, I think what came to mind was, first of all, mental health. And I think a key factor that sort of sustains mental health in the workforce and just the people that I work with the most is resilience, is emotional agility and personal mastery. And it's really about handling, the massive amounts of stress that everybody, faces in 2023. So I think my journey in resilience and understanding how you can use resilience and purpose to really dig deep to get that motivation, although stress levels are high and you are facing adverse circumstances.
Now, obviously, these 3 points are quite weighted, and we're going to unpack each of them. And you've just touched on the resilience. And I know we were chatting about this yesterday, and I'm seeing it more and more that some words are very fad-like. We see that the toxic words get thrown out there that, every person under the sun is a narcissist, or every person under the sun is codependent. But then there's certain words that are kind of overused in society that it loses its luster. So like, for example, limitless. Resilience being one of them, purpose. And we were chatting about that, and I said to you that a lot of us understand the word resilience in our minds, almost like the textbook definition or the dictionary definition, but we don't see it translated into our reality. And I don't want people to not have resilience. I don't want people to kind of push it aside and be like, oh, I have it, or I don't know if I have it, but whatever. How do you see this whole resilience aspect of a human's life kind of currently? You were saying 2023. How does this look in reality at the moment? I mean, it can be any age. We've got clients at our practice, tweens, teens, and adults. You work a lot with adults. And in the corporate space, which you're also going to get into at some point in this podcast. But what's your thoughts around this resilience translation into reality in the current context? What's it like out there? What are you experiencing at the moment?
Okay. And that's a good question, Lucinda. I think there's a lot there. So I'm just going to dive straight in and start with what is the definition of resilience, and what is it not, right? Because there's a lot of times there's like a misunderstanding. I think when I think about resilience, I can think about the man who swam around England, or David Goggins, who ran 7 different 100-mile races in 7 days. And really, that is an aspect of resilience for sure. But honestly, when speaking in the real world context for us normal people, resilience is your ability to face adversity and, excuse me, and still keep moving forward. There's this amazing scene from Rocky Balboa. I'm not quite sure what the installment was exactly, which number it was, but he speaks to his son in this one scene, and he tells his son that life is not about how hard you can hit, but rather it's about how many hits you can take and keep moving forward. And that really is what I think takes resilience, or grabs the word resilience the best. And I think the challenge we face so much, especially as young people, young, motivated, driven individuals, is that we have to understand that there are various different aspects of motivation within someone, right? So first of all, if you start with money, you get a salary, right? You get rewarded from a monetary point of view. What happens is it does give you motivation, but it doesn't sustain motivation all the time, because you might have a financial goal or some sort of financial struggle. Now, after working consistently and diligently, after about 6 months, you feel like there's not this money motivation inside you anymore. So what do I do now? Yes, you can maybe try and keep up with the Joneses, and I know a lot of people are motivated by that. But I think as you grow in your journey, in your professional journey, you have to understand that you have to build motivation internally as well. There has to be some sort of character development that happens inside an individual that helps them to carry through the days when the money's not enough, when you're feeling sick, when there's a lot of stress personally happening in your life. Maybe you and your wife had a really bad fight, or your parents aren't doing too well. Then you have to garner that ability to do what you have to do despite of how you feel. And really, that is one big aspect of resilience that I think young people have to develop, but any person really has to develop the discipline to carry through with what they said they were going to do and what was expected of them, so they can reach the goal that they have envisioned, or something like that. I hope that answers the question.
No, it does, but also I'm going to throw some curveballs along the way, because I work with a lot of people every hour of the day, every day in the week, and we all want resilience. Okay, and as we move from resilience into personal mastery, I can see how this is going to segue into the next point very soon, but let's just stick to resilience. I'm seeing more and more that, and I'm going to say human beings because I don't want to put ages to it, like adults or tweens or teens. It's just literally human beings who are mentally fatigued and also physically fatigued, that their whole body and mind is in this inflammation mode. It's
stress.
in this prolonged stress mode, then going into anxiety, and then the anxiety is left and it compounds and it festers, and then it's anxiety attacks, and then the anxiety attacks become entry-level depression, and then there's panic attacks, and that already is a chemical, a nerve reaction. Panic attacks quite severe, quite further along. So there's a lot of neglect along the way, and with being so bogged down and so, almost want to say suffocated, underneath this pile of rubble, if you can call it that, resilience is really tough to get from the thought of resilience to the reality of it translating now in your day-to-day. What I've come to realize is, and I don't know, you can speak into this because you are an activist for mental health. And I know there's stigmas that we'll get to that you would love to see also broken down. But I've come to realize that clients that come through counseling or therapy, because just by the way, everybody, there's a difference between the two scopes. The Tiny Room's big on advocating and educating on that, but regardless, we can do a totally separate podcast for that. And bring our registered counselor in. I think that's a good idea. But anyway, so as they come through the sessions and they start getting, or the unpacking takes place, it's almost like peeling that onion. taking the first layers off, and then getting that clarity after unpacking and then rebuilding, I find then the resilience seems more attainable and the resilience seems more of a reality for people. So, I mean, we know multidisciplinary, we all who are advocates for mental health and activists and practitioners in our field of mental health in our industry, we know that we all need to work together to take a human being from this suffocating under this pile of rubble to then seeing that resilience. Where have you seen, I almost want to say, where in the supply chain, I know that sounds awful, but where in the supply chain have you kind of found yourself to be at? Are you in the corporate space where you are working with individuals who have gone through counseling or therapy or seeing a counselor and therapist, and you know, similar to a life coach, are coming on board and getting that resilience to become more of a focal point? Because I wouldn't have the time in my therapy process to really bring about the resilience and maybe the personal mastery to the degree that you do it, if that makes sense. Like, I know what I'm there to do and what with the client and where to get them to, and then you would now plug in your heart's desire or your coaching to kind of do the next thing, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense.
No, I'm 100% with you. I think what we're talking about is, you know, where does the healing happen in the supply chain, like you said, and where does the coaching happen, and really where is the difference? Because I think there's a misunderstanding between for people between, okay, so what is a coach and what exactly is a therapist, and what's the difference, right? Because a therapist doesn't coach necessarily, and a coach doesn't heal, right? The best way I can describe what I do is that I build communication from research to help people better understand themselves and their situations so they can move forward in life and grow as individuals, build character through the tough times. Because that's in the end, that's all you have, right? We're all going to sit around a table with our families one day and we're going to have to share stories. And what really makes a good story is a good character. And building resilience in someone makes them go through those challenges so they can have that great story one day. So I don't know, maybe you want to be admired by your family or by your co-workers or by your friends. And the only way that happens is by seeing through the adversity in life and actually having something to show for it. So I think really where therapy and counseling treats a problem, could be a mental illness, could be severe trauma that an individual experienced in his life that is just not navigating through. And then there's a healer needed. And I think really that's where the tiny room therapy is so fantastic, because, you know, I think a lot of people grow up without gaining the knowledge and experience and teaching to handle trauma and process trauma so that it can actually leave your life and leave your experience as a human. So to carry on from that point, I think for me personally, resilience was something that I encountered early in life because I experienced some setbacks in my personal life. When I was about 19 years old, I lost my dad. My mom and I had to go our separate ways at that stage in my life. And I was forced to decide what I wanted to do with my life, right? I had zero confidence in myself. I had nothing that I could show that actually made me someone that I was proud of. I had to build everything from the ground up because I was such an average kid growing up, right? I was a typical ADHD kid, you know, doing every single sport you can imagine because some things just bored me so much so quickly. And also, I hated school. The school system didn't serve me at all. Literally, the only thing
Nothing's changed there, just by the way.
Yeah, which is such a shame. But the only thing I took with me leaving school was that I wasn't really good at math. And because I'm not too good at math, I really should consider doing something that's not academic at all. And that was a lie. Once again, it was a massive lie. And the other lie I had to grow out of was that whole stigma around do the work that you love and you'll never work a day in your life, or find your passion and you'll never work a day in your life. And I had this image in my head that people who find their purpose and find their passion, they sort of wake up and just levitate through the room and they accidentally make $1 million. And that's just not at all not at all reality. And those were lies that we grew up with, and I had to overcome that. And honestly, I had to dig deep to get myself through the emotional challenges, get myself through the stress, and also dealing with the fact that I didn't necessarily have a support structure, especially not emotionally, right? So carrying on from varsity, I entered the workforce and I got into the sales environment because I think that was where most of my aptitude lied. So I went into that, and literally for 5 years, I was selling solutions that I found boring, that I couldn't care about, right? To solve problems that I couldn't care less about, that it didn't feature on my radar. And I was very unhappy. I was doing well. I was fortunate enough to, be the best in both of the sales teams that I worked in. For a certain period of time, there's always people going up and going down. So I made the top of the team, luckily, as being the youngest. And that felt really good, but also very wrong at the same time. Something was always off. And the money was good, but it wasn't enough. And I think the point of realization that hit me was, okay, because I've not done the necessary inner work to find what sets my heart on fire, for that reason, I am now suffering.
Okay.
So the uncomfortable place I found myself in was uncomfortable enough for me to decide, okay, I'm not going to be going out with friends. I'm not going to be, just scrolling around on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube mindlessly. I'm going to start seriously journaling, and I'm going to start seriously praying about what is the point of work. What is the solution that I truly find inspiring and that sets my heart on fire? And
Sure.
what are the problems that I seriously cared about?
Yeah.
So I had to pivot all that. And I think luckily it was a bit easier being in sales, because I guess that's sort of the way you get wired, right? Is solution versus problem and money. But that's where I built resilience separate from money, separate from the Joneses that I had to keep up with. I built resilience by finding my true self inside and being willing to walk around with a bit of an identity crisis for a while. And because that's what you need to build up the true identity, right? To find yourself again, so that you can go through just about anything and still come out on top, because it's not about me as much as it's about serving people around me. Just before you carry on there, Lucinda, I'm just going to make sure that my power is good.
Okay, you're charging.
Yeah, just give me a sec, but I'm listening.
So many amazing things that it's actually, I've got like 3 or 4 points in my thoughts already. And I mean, these 3 or 4 points can already be elaborated on quite a bit. So I'm hoping that some will go quicker than the others. But when I think of resilience in the context that you've now shared your personal story, or at least some of it, I'm hearing, there's consistency in resilience, okay? And consistency is a battle for so many of us, okay? So that's the one thing I was thinking about. The other thing I was thinking about is men. Resilience being seen as something to kind of look up to and be like, oh, awesome, I have resilience. But then at the same time, it can also go to the point of being a blockage to reaching out and getting the professional help needed. Do the healing and the psychological, behavioral, emotional side of things. So that's the other thing I was thinking of. So the consistency, which is a battle for tweens, teens, and adults. And then the men who kind of like nobly walk around with like, oh, I'm so resilient that I can just brush so many things off and I can just,
Sure.
go with so many battles along the way and my battle scars, and that's not always healthy. So, and then the other thing I was thinking about is, let's not get into the other stuff. It's going to come into your personal mastery, so I don't want to jump the gun. But maybe just speak into, let's leave the consistency aside, because consistency can be a conversation in itself, because it is something we could all get better at. But let's speak into resilience being kind of put up on a pedestal where, oh, we all want to strive to be resilient and be so amazing. But how it can be a blockage to even us as South Africans, ons is hard gebak, so we don't tend to reach out. It's like we sort our own stuff out, but at the same time, we're not all professionally trained to know how to sort our things out. And we have a lot of tools that we lack, a lot of mechanisms, and you do need that professional help. So in the men's space, I'm going to go there. What has your experience been like? I've seen the changes. I've seen the developments. We have more and more men reaching out and actually coming through our doors to be better husbands, be better employees, be better executives and directors and CEOs and business owners of all ages. So I am seeing a shift in this mindset and in the stigma that it's in your corp, it's in your corp, kom reg, that type of thing. So that is slowly.
Cowboys don't cry.
Yeah, and like, seen as a weakling now if you're going to go to a counselor or a therapist or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out there. Like, what's your thoughts? What's your heart behind that? What are you seeing on the ground? Share with us.
So,
as a man, tell us.
Yes, as a man, as a man who wants to be humble in his approach towards anything, I think mental health, anything trauma. Really, I think there's a point where every man sort of needs to realize when he has experienced trauma. And I think trauma is such a vague concept, right? And doing my bit of research into it, and obviously, Lucinda, this is with you in the room, so please bear with me. But essentially, it's your brain's mechanism, or it's your brain's response to an unanticipated event. So essentially, your brain is a series of neural networks. And if your brain experiences an event that it could not anticipate, the fact that there's no network there or no connection between your current circumstance and your next circumstance is where you experience trauma. For instance, if you are with someone, right, you're in a relationship and that person ends up leaving. Essentially, your motivational system kicks in to get you to that person. But the fact that you can't, and it's that battle, and you can't make a specific effort to get yourself closer to that person, that's really where the trauma happens. And what happens is that we build a specific set of, let's say, unhealthy behaviors to cope with that trauma sometimes, because we have all this built up energy that we would have directed towards this person we lost or whatever. But now it has to be directed and channeled into the right direction. And I think it's so important for us to get a good grip on, okay, so what is just something that I can brush off, right? What is a bad thought or an irrational fear, or just someone who made a bad opinion or had a bad opinion or made a bad comment? And what really is serious stuff, right? So there's a lot of education needed, I think, amongst men to understand what really is the serious stuff that I should look into. Because there's no scope, honestly. I think personally, I was blessed enough to grow up in a house where I was encouraged to talk about my feelings. um, my parents were always very, let's say, concerned about my mental health, I'd say, or my physical health and my emotional health, right? Mental health was such a stigma that time as well, back in 2010, 11, 12. You would go to the doctor and you would tell him you feel down all the time, and within 10 minutes, he'd give you a antidepressant, right? That's seriously, that was my experience. But emotional health is another story. And talking about what's going on in your life and talking about what your feelings are really puts you in a position where someone can guide you in that. And that's where I think I would like to hand the mic to you, Lucinda, to understand your current experience with men that you see coming into your therapy rooms more often. How do you find, do they communicate their feelings? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Or is it just a struggle?
What you were saying a few seconds ago is spot on, that what are things that you can address yourself and what are things that you can't. And that's maybe not even just a men thing. Obviously, we're now putting it in the context of okay, we're talking to the male client here or males in our country. The men that come through our doors are just as confused.
Yeah.
Because as they go through the tiny room process or journey, we call it a counseling or therapy journey, depending on what your need is and where you're at, whatever the issue is and the challenges are. We'll screen you and you'll make sure that you're getting the right treatment. But they'll come in, and as they go on the journey, that penny will drop where it's like, oh my heck, I actually have no idea who I am. And once they realize my thoughts aren't even my thoughts,
Sure.
the lenses that we call it a filter, that filter that they created or got created over the adolescent years and whatever was never theirs, was based on other people's measuring sticks, other people's or other environments, other bubbles of experiences that you've kind of floated into. It's never been that filter has never been created 100% as JP. But how can you make that filter or have your own customized measuring stick in place if nobody's helped you in those crucial adolescent years know the detail of your personality? That takes skill. Okay, I've come to realize that takes skill. Once my clients see in detail who they are, they can make confident and powerful choices and decisions, because for the last 2 to 3 decades, those choices and decisions have been based on kind of falsehoods. It's been based on other people's measuring sticks. It's not yours. So now it's like strokes of a paintbrush. You do that painting of those non-JP choices and decisions.
Yeah.
What do you think that picture is going to look like? You're not going to like what you see. You're going to be like, how much of JP is in this picture, which is your life? I mean, that painting. You're like, there's not a lot of JP in here. There's maybe a 10%. Some clients say there's nothing. It's below zero. It's like in the minus.
Yeah.
You can't continue like that, because that's that survival mode where you want to distract, you want to not look inward, you don't like and love what you see because you don't actually know who you are. So there's a lot of confusion. So a lot of the time we bring perspective back, we bring clarity in the confusion, we declutter or unpack the whole mental fatigue, and then the physical fatigue kind of follows, or sometimes it goes parallel. But the men that come through, I think they're kind of shocked that we don't get all like talky about your feelies, like we are very much, your present situation is overwhelming. We start with your present and we see what comes up. And you were talking about trauma. And this is another thing that I feel men and just humans in general, people in general, don't realize that trauma is compound. So we can have small traumas, small disappointments. There's trauma when there's death. So it's not just a grieving process. There's also sometimes a trauma process that should be happening in parallel. But a lot of people, when there's a death in the family and it is traumatic, they don't go for trauma debriefing. They don't go for grief counseling. And so then those traumas, and then there's all kinds of other disappointments. You were talking about relationships coming to an end. People don't realize, and men go through this also, heartache after a breakup. They don't go through a grieving process because it's like the understanding of grief and trauma, and that there's a process to unpack and address and heal and literally kind of bulldoze through healthily,
that's true.
that you can't always do yourself. You need somebody that knows what they're doing. You sit in that festers, that trauma and that grief festers, and because a lot of people, and I'm also not going to label it again as men, but a lot of people don't realize those small traumas actually compound and they fester. And then you wake up 5 years down the line and you wonder why you're having panic attacks, or you have a little nervous breakdown, or you have rage like you've never known it before, or you're drinking heavily, or you're doing drugs, or all kinds of things like that. Your symptoms or your behavior, which a lot of time is the symptom, you don't understand why. So there's a lot of logic to it. And I think our male clients love the fact that we bring a lot of logic. It's not, oh, I thought I was going to come and be all sad. I thought I was going to come and be all moody. I'm like, we're not clinical. We're not, yes, we have the clinical background and training, but our whole vibe is reality, is humanistic, is people focused. You know, we understand the real world, and we want to unpack that and deal with that. So I also know the corporate space. So our whole way of facilitating our counseling and therapy is we understand the engineering space. We understand the mind of an engineer. You know, we understand the corporate space, the executive, the director, the sales team, the pressures of being a real estate agent, you know, and the pressures of those high ticket items that you need to sell, which is a house. And it's not just 100 rands, you know, it's like a lot of money. So there's a lot of pressure in all these different industries and sales teams and different types of teams. For me, you can't just push that aside and say, oh, let's just talk about your thoughts and your feelings. So I think we are very much in line with our male clients. And I think more and more there's education in a broader sense, like you said. The different scopes and how this all works and what you can deal with yourself and what you can't. And you're giving me more content of how we should actually get that out there and educate more on what you can deal with yourself, when you need help and all the rest of it. But you being on this call and being a guy and being such an activist and advocate for mental health, it is inspiring, I'm sure, to a lot of the listeners and a lot of the viewers. And you have a passion for breaking down stigmas. So going into the personal mastery and then also the emotional agility, if we're going to move on now to personal mastery, and somewhere along the line, maybe you can bring in some of the stigmas. It's kind of weave it through or thread it through if you can, and just share your heart around these last 2 points. Like, what is this personal mastery? You know, share your story around that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you said a lot of good things there, Lucinda, and there's a lot to take out and nitpick and build into the whole personal mastery narrative, right? So I think without us being able to fight this, we grow up in a system. And this system is driven by your ability to keep up with society. You know, at 18 years old, you finish school. At 23 years old, you most probably have some sort of degree. At age 25, you've had quite a solid career. Then you have to get married. And then when you're about between 28 or 27 and 30 years old, then you have to be, you know, a father already, and you have to have a very steady career. And, you know, we're so faced with being afraid to be left out by the crowd, because I guess it's in our essence as humans, right? We want to fit in, we want to be part of a bigger group, and be accepted. And I think the problem is that we get sidetracked from who we really are, because somewhere in our lives we were open and real about who we were, in our aspirations, our ambitions, what we liked, what we were naturally drawn to. And we were told that that is wrong. No, you're not supposed to like that. You're supposed to focus on math. You're supposed to focus on being better at science so you can become an engineer. So let's take an example, right? You're a kid, you're a little boy, 9 years old, and you're just shining and you love superheroes, right? You love the comics, you love the movies, you love the action figures, and it's your thing. And very quickly in your life, you get told, no, put that down. No, stop that. Stop that. No, that's not good. Stop that. Focus on what's important right now. And you lose touch of who you really are, because it's not as much the comic book that you love or the action figure you love. You might just be so into the character development of a person, or you might just like the artistic part of the comics. There's so much that you can open up there that makes you naturally drawn to that thing. So when you grow up and you become a man and you have to decide what you want to do with your life, you put yourself down, because that's never good enough. That's never going to be practical. That's never going to work. That's not going to get me a wife, etc. So I don't care who I am. And something you said there was, you can never change your personality, and some guys never really understand themselves. And there's this quote, and I love this. It says, your level of satisfaction in your life is directly proportionate to the level of self-awareness you have.
Sure.
And that's where personal mastery starts flowing, because seriously, if you don't have this point of reference in your life where you know, this is who I've always been. I've always done this. This has always been my natural inclination toward sports or towards friends or towards whatever, right? If you can build your rock on some recollection of a past event where you felt yourself just flowing and caught in this field of interest, then you have a good idea of where your future is pointing, but you've always denied it. And I want to go out on a limb and say that, you know what, you've always known what your passions were. You've always known what was important to you, but you've just never wanted to accept it. And it's that self-acceptance that needs to happen, essentially, where you will decide, okay, if I'm not going to handle this part of myself, then I will forever be a moving target to satisfy, because I will be truly satisfied when I am busy with work that lights my heart on fire. But I'm never going to be that, because that's not practical. So where does that leave men? It leaves you always in a place of a false identity. And I tried that for a while, and it blew up in my face, because I was just so unhappy at the end of the day with my life, because I would reach this massive success, right? This amazing sales target. Then I'd be like, meh. Or I would land an awesome job and I'd be like, meh. I didn't care. And, you know, segueing into my life right now, I wouldn't say that it's the most comfortable position I've ever been in. I'm facing more challenges than I've ever faced in my entire life, but I have this inner peace with myself that what I do is truly fulfilling. And we spoke earlier when we were in the resilience aspect of the conversation. We spoke about deciding what the problems are you care about and figuring out the solution you want to be for that problem. Once again, in your personal mastery, that is something that's been part of you your entire life, right? I can recall one specific time when I was on my way for vacation with my grandparents, and we were at a filling station, and there was this extremely impoverished child who showed up in outside the window, and it literally, I couldn't stop thinking about that for about 3 years, because I couldn't stop thinking about how it was not his fault. It was not his thing that it was his battle he's fighting, yes, but it's not his fault. And that's where everything started for me around coaching, because I was looking at how people suffer in circumstances that are not caused by them, but they're forced to take that on because of the bad decisions made by those who are supposed to look after them.
That's powerful.
And that's just something that's always stuck with me, and I can't tell you why. And when it comes to personal mastery, a lot of times that's just who you are, and you can't tell anyone why. It's just always been that way. It's like it chooses you. It does. You don't choose it. So I think just to flow it back over to your side where you were talking about men and the stigmatization. I think if you're a guy in a practical setting and you're in a job you don't like and you feel like there's this inner battle with your identity and your true calling, and you don't really know how to handle it, I think the best first step is speak to your family. Be man enough to ask them the questions that are kind of uncomfortable. An example is go up to your brother or to your sister or to your mom or to an aunt or someone who spent a lot of time with you growing up and ask them, what's the one thing that always stood out? Or what's that thing you saw in me growing up that you truly found admirable? And reach out to friends, ask them this question, be vulnerable about the fact that, hey, I'm figuring things out. I'm a human being, okay? Life has been pretty hectic the past 15 years, keeping up with the Joneses. And guess what? I'm unhappy, okay? And that's fine. So I'm going to be asking you a few questions because I really need your help. Be my friend, please. And from that point, you can start building something that brings you back to what truly keeps you fulfilled as a man and what helps you build the true identity that makes you more resilient and master the gifts you were given.
Sure. But you also spoke about vulnerability, and we definitely, I think if Brene Brown was in the room, she will hopefully be proud of me. But I've come to realize recently a huge blockage to being vulnerable is pride. And yeah, we won't go into that. And
Sure.
I think culturally, you're on my background, there's quite a lot of pride, and I feel that
That's true.
in our upbringing and like I said, culturally in South Africa, but also there's different cultures in South Africa. More so in certain cultures than others, there is this blockage of pride. And I really wasn't sure what was the blockage to being vulnerable. But it only just recently came to me because there were a couple of engagements with people where I could see that they couldn't be vulnerable. They always wanted to be seen as, oh, I've got it together, but they were dying inside. Literally being suicidal. And then I was like probing a bit more, and then I thought, oh, is it being self-righteous? Like, are they self-righteous? And then it's like, no, but they're not self-righteous. And then we just all hit the nail on the head, and it was like, it's pride. And I had a battle with pride for many, many years, and I took myself too seriously. I took this life too seriously. I couldn't be childlike. I was like, always had to be this, it was pride. So got rid of the pride, and now I'm more childlike than ever. Don't have an age. So even though I
can vouch for that
earlier, but for the rest of my life, I don't have an age. So yeah, it's just being childlike and realizing you can be childlike and you don't have to be childish. But just in the last few moments to hit on the whole emotional agility, because I'm quite intrigued by this point. I think you've covered all of, or spoken into, the stereotypes and the stigmas, and hopefully debunked some of the thoughts around reaching out and vulnerability being actually a huge strength.
Pride,
in anybody's life, and all of us, it's not just men, but all of us could ask ourselves the question, is pride possibly blocking us from being vulnerable and reaching out and having personal mastery by going to counseling, going to therapy, getting coaching from you? What's your thoughts on this point of emotional agility? What do you mean by this?
That's a great question. So emotional agility, quite simply, is your ability to expend emotional energy on what matters so that you can have it for the right times. So it's really about an aspect of emotional intelligence. So a great example is you're on your way to work and there's a taxi that just cuts you off in traffic, and you have this emotional energy that's just building up in the form of anger, and you feel like you want to blow up and get out of that car and flip that taxi over, and you want to storm into work and tell that one colleague that you've always been so unhappy with him or his work or whatever.
Oh
And
my goodness. This is so
essentially,
true. That's why I'm laughing.
yeah, and
You hear it all the time.
I've been that guy. I've literally been that guy, and I'm speaking from experience. And essentially, you've expended so much of your emotional energy just on your way to work. So emotional agility really is where you can get a hold of the amount of emotional energy that you have, and how you can expend it into the directions where it comes back to you. So I would say, if I'm a person who's emotionally agile, I understand myself in terms of what energizes me and what really drains me.
Yeah, brilliant.
And how can I manage that so that I am functioning optimally in my day-to-day life? A great example is, I just know, and I don't know why it is this way, but it's always been this way, that if ever I go and I physically exude the strength I have or the energy that I have, for some reason I get charged. Also, if I decide that I'm going to stay in on a Friday evening because I've had a long week, I wake up on that Saturday morning feeling like I have superpowers, because I am an introvert and I charge when I'm on my own.
Yeah.
And really, I think emotional agility is another part of serious introspection and serious, let's say, personal understanding, where okay, I'm an introvert so I'm going to stop trying to be this extrovert that's trying to impress everyone and that people are expecting me to be. Because I just don't have the energy anymore.
Yeah. It's not in line with your personality. And that's also, we do a personality assessment during our therapy. And we've strategically chose the one that we use. It's extremely accurate, and we've used a couple of them over the years. But it's so detailed to get people to also understand what extrovert and introvert means. Because a lot of people think that introverts are antisocial and quiet and like hermits. And it's just the way that society has framed it.
And they're shy and they can't talk.
And like extroverts are social butterflies. I'm like, no, extroverts recharge being around other people, and introverts recharge being on their own. It's not to say that introverts don't want to be around people and that we like antisocial. I don't like these portions of people's personalities being framed negatively, because it starts when we're kids already. The teacher might say something really not wise, don't think it through, or even your parents or even grandparents, and aunties and uncles and any adults around us, but even our friends, little friends that we have. And as we get older, certain portions of our personalities are framed so regularly negatively, and that we shy away from so many portions of our personality that you look and you're like, well, what's left, like it's so limited. And so I always say that clients live this much of themselves. This is like JP, this is Lucinda, and this is actually Lucinda, but you're not living a full version of yourself. And by the time they've gone through our 8 sessions of therapy, which is our journey here and our process, they are literally understanding their full personality in detail and living all of it to the best of their ability and flourishing in every single nook and cranny of your personality. And it's just the wordings that we don't know, the definitions and all that stuff. It's debunking all of that. It's like, no, these are falsehoods. Whatever we've been told over the years is not true. And you were saying about exercise also.
True.
It does. The endorphins that you get from exercising, the physical aspect of your mental health is so it's needed, and it's not brought through the eating and the actual physical activity. But then we call it buzzing and jazzing here. Okay, I make up words here at the tiny room. So it's knowing what buzzes and jazzes you. And like you said, for emotional agility, to be in control of your emotions. It's not to say that you're going to now eliminate your emotions. We all going to have emotions. You can't eliminate emotions. What are you going to be, iRobot? You know, like, I mean,
Yeah.
really now. So you have emotions. We're human. We're organic matter, and we have
Yeah.
emotions. So it's being on top of them and being in control and having this emotional agility. It's spot on. But you can't do that in the chaos. You can't do that in the overwhelmed. You can't do that in the
No.
fogginess or the mental fatigue. So you got to get that sorted, get the clarity, get the energy back. And then you need the mechanisms and the tools. And how do you kind of gain control again over your emotions
Yeah, that's
to
good.
know what fills you, like you said, and energizes you, and what depletes you. Almost like what
That's good.
serves you and what doesn't serve you. It's getting real and very brutally honest, and also brutal in your boundaries, so that
Yeah.
you can learn to say no. And we have toxic people pleasers. It's like the common client that comes through our doors are kind, generous, compassionate,
Mm,
nice people in
yeah.
their personalities. That's who they are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
over the years, they've been taken advantage of. They've lost portions of their personality because it's been framed as though you're weak, you're passive, and all these, you are a softie, all these
Yeah.
negative ways of, and then you start hiding away from it, but also you cross the line of you've given so much of yourself that you are now
Mm,
concerned about everybody liking you. You just want to
mm,
people please. You
absolutely.
don't say no, you say yes to everything. My board is full, and you're losing your mind,
And I
literally.
think that's so good, Lucinda, because I think you're touching on a question I get is
Mm.
why do I need a coach? And the reason is because you don't necessarily have put in the time, or you've not necessarily put in the time to understand yourself, first of all, and secondly, understand your situation. It's the
Sure.
same reason any sports team needs a coach. It's because the team or the player is on the field playing the game.
Mm.
He can't see his mistakes from the side. He can't see where his opponent has the upper hand. And essentially, that's the same reason someone needs a resilience coach or a professional coach or a purpose coach, is
Mm.
because we don't understand our situations as well as we should. And, the nerds like us, and I mean that with all due respect,
I
we,
own it.
yeah, we go out on the internet and we go and research things like discipline and resilience and emotional agility and neuroscience and psychology because it's just our food, right? We eat it by the truckloads. And I think if you allow a coach into your life to come and help you understand why you are the way you are, you might be end up dealing with a lot less fear and shame and condemnation.
Sure.
So a great example, for instance, is something like procrastination, right? Everybody has some sort of procrastination in their life. So what goes through your mind when you procrastinate is that you're lazy. Oh, it's just me, my lazy old self,
Mm.
putting
Mm.
off work until the last minute. And then I end up doing the work to 60% of my capabilities. And then, oh man, it's just me. And you go into this cycle, especially as a student. I think we've all been serious procrastinators. And me speaking from experience, right? Um, I have come to understand why it happens. And the reason is not because you're lazy. If you look at procrastination, it's not your inability to do something. You don't procrastinate because of your lack of energy, right? Laziness is a lack of energy and just apathy. You're not doing anything if
Mm.
you're lazy.
Mm.
Procrastination means that you are distracting yourself from a task. You're scrolling on your phone, you're watching YouTube, you're watching a series when you know you're supposed to be studying. And the reason you do that is because it's a form of stress management.
Huh.
Because if you find yourself in a place where you have high stress levels, your brain is just saying, give me a break, give me a break, give me a break,
Yep.
give me a break, give me a break.
Spot on.
So let's say you walk into work and once again you had this massive fight with your spouse or your parents aren't doing well, your car broke down or there's this problem. you walk into work with this insane amount of stress, and now all of a sudden you have to have this hard conversation with one of your colleagues who's been underperforming, right? And you're like, oh my word, I already have all this stress, and now I have to have this flippin' difficult conversation. I'm just gonna scroll Instagram for a while. So that you can deal with that stress, right? So you can channel it somewhere and just feel like you can calm down. And essentially, if you understand that, and that you are actually just dealing with stress because you have a untidy room, essentially, you'll be less condemning onto yourself. So to carry on into that point a bit further, stress a lot of times happens because of uncertainty and unclarity, and a disparity on what the situation actually is. So let's take a financial situation, for instance, right? If you don't have your budget in place, if you don't know what your income is going to be, if you don't understand what your expenses are going to be and what you're supposed to be doing with the money that's left, you stress. But if you just package that and clean up the room, for instance, and go and put everything in the shelves where it has to be, get the mess off the floor, tidy the bed, then there will be a place of rest, and that stress will be managed in a healthy way. And essentially, you'll find yourself being more productive because you're not carrying around this massive bag of just stress. So once again, why do I need a coach? It's because when you're in that situation of stress, you are cognitively impaired a lot of times. And when you get a coach to come alongside you and help you better understand the situation, you find yourself being freed so you can go forward and be more productive and grow into the person you were meant to be.
Sure. Well, JP, we've come to the end of our time. I'm so sorry. We could definitely carry on talking about so many of this stuff, because I was just thinking of our performance therapy and you talking about the coaching, and I've seen our corporate clients improve on their productivity and their performance in the corporate space, their sales, once that stress is gone. And like you said, the procrastination is no longer there. And then everything else just flows a lot easier. So you are
exactly
dead on point with that. Just in closing, I just really want to thank you for your time. And to everybody that's watching, we're going to pop JP's details, in the description, so you can go and message him directly, get linked up with his coaching, just kind of fire a whole bunch of things that you had on your mind. Send him some encouragement and just let him know what parts of this podcast you enjoyed, and what you want to know more about, because he's got his own platforms and he can always go do more content to speak into certain elements more. We will have JP back later on in the year, a couple of months' time. We'll be getting all our guests to come back. But once again, thank you so much. I love the fact that you spoke into our male client, into their lives, but at the same time, we've just spoken into people's lives. And I love that you shared your story. You were vulnerable with us. You told us a little bit about your story. And there's just so many more things that I've written down here that I'd love to chat about in our next time together. And we can flesh out a few more things in depth. We are just scratching the surface, but please comment under the video. Let us know your thoughts and questions, and we want to engage with you. So like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share. We need to get this information out there. So yeah, JP, thank you. I really appreciate it. You must have the most amazing day, and we look forward to having you back in the tiny room. And thank you for advocating and being a lover of the tiny room. We've loved walking the journey with you and partnering with you and your resilience coaching. So yeah, thanks again. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks for having me, Lucinda.
Pleasure. Thank you. Bye.